Why did the Dreamliner stumble when faced with Qantas's ultimate challenge? Was it a failure of design, a miscalculation of ambition, or simply the wrong aircraft for a mission no plane had ever completed before? And more importantly, what does this reveal about the future of ultra-long-haul flying? Today, we'll uncover why the Boeing 787, hailed as a game-changer, fell short of Qantas's greatest goal and what came next for the airline's quest to conquer the skies. For as long as most Australians can remember, flying to Europe has been a marathon. Known as the kangaroo route, the journey from Sydney to London once took days, with stops in places like Singapore, Bahrain, and Athens. Even today, it usually means at least one layover, hours spent waiting in airports far from home, dealing with delays and adjusting to unfamiliar time zones before reaching the final destination. For Qantas, the airline that calls itself the Spirit of Australia, this long journey has always been a symbol of both national pride and frustration. Pride because connecting Australia to the world has been its mission since the 1920s. Frustration because despite advances in aviation, the great distance to Europe always forced compromises. Passengers could never simply board in Sydney and step off in London without interruption. That challenge became the heart of a bold dream. Qantas called it Project Sunrise. The name itself was carefully chosen. It referred to the famous World War II missions where Qantas crews flew long-haul flights across the Indian Ocean, often departing in darkness and landing with the sunrise. Now, decades later, Qantas wanted to repeat that spirit of endurance, only this time with paying passengers on the world's longest non-stop flight. Why did this matter so much? For travelers, the appeal was clear. A non-stop Sydney-London flight would mean skipping the weariness of stopovers in places like Singapore or Dubai. No more dashing through airports to make connections. No more awkward nights stretched out on terminal chairs. No more stress about missed flights. Instead, you would settle into your seat, watch the sun rise and set from your window, and arrive on the other side of the world in one stretch. For many, this wasn't just convenience, it was the ultimate luxury, the pinnacle of air travel. For Qantas, it was also about prestige. Airlines compete not only on price and service, but on what they can offer that no one else can. To be the first to operate regular non-stop flights from Australia to Europe would place Qantas firmly on the map as a global leader, the kind of headline that captures the imagination of the traveling public. Into this picture stepped the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. When it was unveiled in the 2000s, Boeing promised that the 787 would change long-haul flying forever. Its lightweight carbon fiber body, advanced engines, and fuel-saving technology made it a perfect candidate for routes that stretched traditional limits. Airlines loved it because it burned less fuel. Passengers loved it because it was quieter, with larger windows and better cabin pressure for comfort on long flights. Qantas already had success using the 787 on routes such as Perth to London, proving that the aircraft could handle very long flights. That service was hailed as groundbreaking, a taste of what Project Sunrise could one day become. At first, the mission seemed unachievable, but it actually was, and it was special. When Boeing introduced the 787 Dreamliner, it promised a new era of flying. For decades, long-haul aircraft like the Boeing 747 or the Airbus 340 had carried millions of passengers across oceans, but they did so with heavy frames, thirsty engines, and cabins that often left travelers feeling worn out. The 787 was built to be different, lighter, more efficient, and kinder to the people sitting inside. The biggest breakthrough was in the way the airplane was built. Instead of using traditional aluminum, Boeing constructed most of the 787's body from carbon fiber, a material that is both stronger and lighter. In aviation, every kilogram matters because a lighter aircraft means less fuel is burned, and less fuel means longer range and lower costs. For airlines, this was a golden promise. They could fly farther while spending less. The engines were also new. The 787 was fitted with Rolls-Royce and General Electric designs that used the latest technology to sip fuel more slowly, and run more quietly. Passengers often noticed this change right away. The roar inside the cabin was softened, making conversations easier and sleep more possible. For people used to the loud hum of four-engine jets like the 747, the difference was remarkable. Inside the cabin, the Dreamliner offered comforts no one had seen before. The windows were much larger, with electronic dimming instead of plastic shades. Passengers could look out and see more of the sky, yet still block the light with the push of a button. The air inside was also improved. Because of the strong carbon fiber body, the 787 could keep the cabin at a lower altitude pressure than older planes, which reduced the dry, stuffy feeling that many travelers dreaded. Humidity levels were higher too, so lips and throats didn't dry out as quickly. Many passengers who flew the 787 for the first time recall being surprised at how refreshed they felt after a long trip. The smoother air, larger windows, and softer lighting created a sense of calm. Compared to the stuffy, noisy cabins of older long-haul aircraft, the Dreamliner felt like a glimpse of the future. For airlines, the advantages went beyond comfort. The fuel savings made it possible to open new routes that had never been practical before. Mid-sized cities could suddenly have non-stop flights across oceans without needing the massive demand required to fill a 747. This flexibility was a selling point to carriers like Qantas, which had long searched for ways to bridge the vast distances that separated Australia from the rest of the world. When set against older giants like the 747 or the Airbus 340, the 787 seemed revolutionary. The 747 was iconic, but its four engines made it expensive to operate. The 340 was sleek, but also heavy and fuel-hungry. Both aircraft had carried generations of travelers, yet neither could match the efficiency of the new Dreamliner. All these features made the 787 look like Qantas's perfect tool. Yet, appearances can be deceiving. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever flown on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner? Maybe it was on a holiday you still remember, or perhaps it was the aircraft that carried you across an ocean for the very first time. Some passengers recall the quieter engines or the larger windows that made the sky feel closer. Hold on to that memory, because the next part of this story is about how Qantas pushed the Dreamliner beyond its limits and found it wasn't quite enough. On paper, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner looked like it had everything Qantas needed. It was efficient, lighter than older jets, and capable of flying some of the longest routes in the world. But when it came to Qantas's most ambitious mission, Sydney to London, non-stop, the Dreamliner began to reveal its limits. The problem was range. Sydney and London are almost 17,000 kilometers apart, one of the longest possible passenger flights on Earth. For any aircraft, that distance is a brutal test. To succeed, the plane must carry enough fuel to last for more than 20 hours in the air, while also carrying a full load of passengers and their luggage. This is where the 787 struggled. Even with its carbon fiber body and fuel-saving engines, it couldn't quite manage all three requirements at once. To make the non-stop journey, the Dreamliner had to choose: carry fewer passengers, take less cargo, or leave behind some fuel. In aviation, that trade-off is critical. Airlines don't just sell seats, they also depend on cargo revenue. Every kilogram matters, and reducing payload to make a flight possible often makes it financially unrealistic. Qantas knew this through test flights and simulations. While the Dreamliner could handle ultra-long routes such as Perth to London, stretching it even farther to Sydney proved to be a different story. The aircraft could attempt the journey, but only under conditions that weren't practical for regular operations. Cutting passenger numbers or leaving cargo behind might work for an experiment, but not for a daily service that needed to make money. There were also endurance concerns. The longer an aircraft is in the air, the more variables come into play. Winds, weather, and weight all shift the calculations. On certain trial runs, the 787 pushed close to its absolute limits. While these flights made headlines for proving the possible, they also highlighted the narrow margins Qantas would be working with. A strong headwind over Europe or Asia could be enough to require an unscheduled refueling stop, undermining the very promise of a non-stop service. Another factor was ETOPS, short for Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. Put simply, these are the rules that allow two-engine aircraft, like the 787, to fly long distances over oceans, far from diversion airports. The Dreamliner was certified for this, but operating at the edge of its endurance under ETOPS regulations added another layer of caution. For Qantas, safety margins could not be compromised, even for the sake of a record-breaking flight. All of this created a frustrating picture. The 787 was a marvel in many respects, a step forward for aviation and a beloved aircraft among passengers. Yet for Qantas's dream of Sydney to London, without a stop, it was simply not enough. The trade-offs were too severe, the margins too tight, and the risks too high. In short, the Dreamliner was advanced, but not advanced enough. When Qantas first dreamed of conquering the world's longest flights, many assumed that Boeing would be its partner. After all, Boeing had supplied Qantas with some of its most famous aircraft. The Boeing 707 carried Australians into the jet age. The Boeing 747, with its iconic hump, helped make long-haul travel affordable and reliable. For decades, Boeing and Qantas seemed almost inseparable. But history took a surprising turn. While Boeing's 787 had promised much, it could not quite stretch far enough to make Sydney-London possible without heavy sacrifices. That left Qantas with a decision to make. Should it wait for Boeing to develop something new, or should it look across the Atlantic to Airbus, Boeing's great European rival? Airbus had a contender, the A350 Ultra Long Range. On paper, it was exactly what Qantas needed. Compared to the 787, the A350 was a little bigger, able to carry more fuel without forcing the airline to cut back so much on passengers or cargo. It also had the benefit of being slightly more fuel efficient when flying at extreme ranges. In a world where every extra kilometer mattered, these differences added up. One way to picture the difference is like comparing athletes. The 787 was a brilliant sprinter. It could cover medium and long distances with speed and grace. But the A350 was built for the marathon. It was designed to keep going mile after mile without losing strength. And Project Sunrise was not about a sprint. It was about the ultimate endurance test, staying in the air for nearly 20 hours non-stop. Qantas did not make the decision lightly. Engineers and executives studied both aircraft in detail. Test flights and simulations were run, pilots gave feedback, and fuel calculations were pored over again and again. The airline was searching for more than just numbers. It needed certainty. On such long flights, there could be no margin for error. The results kept pointing in one direction. The A350 had the edge. Its design allowed Qantas to load enough fuel for the journey without giving up too many seats. Its engines, built by Rolls-Royce, were among the most advanced in the world, offering quiet performance and exceptional efficiency. The cabin was also spacious and comfortable, giving passengers a better experience on journeys that would test patience and stamina. For Qantas, the choice was historic. It was not easy to step away from Boeing, a company that had been such a trusted partner for so long. Many older travelers still recall boarding Qantas's first 747s, feeling the excitement of walking upstairs into the bubble or taking off on a jet that seemed almost futuristic at the time. Boeing was part of Qantas's story, part of Australia's connection to the wider world. Yet the airline could not ignore reality. To achieve Project Sunrise, Airbus offered the stronger solution. And so, in the end, Qantas turned to the A350. This decision marked more than just the selection of an airplane. It was a turning point. It showed how fierce the competition between Boeing and Airbus had become. It also showed that Qantas, though proud of its history, was willing to look forward, even if it meant breaking with tradition. For passengers, the choice meant something very simple: the chance to one day board a Qantas jet in Sydney and not step off until they arrived in London or New York. That dream, long thought impossible, now had an aircraft capable of making it real. In short, Qantas's great leap toward Project Sunrise rested not with the partner of its past, but with a new ally, the Airbus A350. Even though the Boeing 787 could not deliver on Qantas's grand ambition of flying non-stop from Sydney to London, it still became one of the most important planes in the airline's history. In fact, for many travelers, the Dreamliner remains a favorite. From the moment Qantas introduced it on medium and long routes, passengers noticed the difference. The cabin felt fresher, with higher humidity that reduced the dry, scratchy throats so common on long flights. The larger windows let in more light, giving journeys a more open, airy feel. Many recall their first flight on the Dreamliner as a moment when air travel seemed to move a step forward, making hours in the sky a little more human. For some Australians, their first trip overseas in years took place on a 787. They remember walking down the jet bridge, seeing the curved wingtips and feeling part of something new. Families traveling to the United States or Asia often commented on how much smoother the flight felt. Pilots praised the advanced systems that reduced turbulence and gave a steadier ride. Even small touches like quieter engines made a difference. Passengers could talk more easily, rest without as much background roar, and arrive feeling less drained. So, while the Dreamliner was not strong enough to conquer Project Sunrise, it was far from a failure. It carved out its place on Qantas routes to places like Perth to London, where it performed impressively and carried thousands of travelers more comfortably than ever before. For many, these flights created cherished memories, reunions with family, holidays after years of saving, or business trips that opened new opportunities. Looking back, there is also a sense of nostalgia. The Dreamliner represents a moment in aviation when hopes were high and technology promised to erase distance like never before. Some passengers even keep photos of their first 787 flight, treating it as a milestone. Much like earlier generations remembered the 747 as the jumbo jet that changed everything, the 787 earned its own place in people's hearts. Yet the decision by Qantas to lean toward Airbus for its most ambitious project shows that aviation progress is rarely about one aircraft alone. Each plane has its role. Some are built for speed, some for carrying heavy loads, and others for pushing the limits of distance. The lesson is clear: it is not enough for a plane to be advanced or comfortable. It must also be the right fit for the mission at hand. For Qantas, the 787 was the aircraft that proved many new ideas could work. It showed that passengers cared deeply about comfort, and that even small improvements mattered on long journeys. And so the story circles back to the question that has driven this journey. If the Dreamliner couldn't do it, who would carry passengers on the world's longest flights? Qantas believes the answer lies with Airbus. Time will tell if the A350 lives up to that promise. What is certain is that every step, every attempt, every new design, every memory made in the sky brings us closer to that dream. The Dreamliner may not have reached the holy grail of air travel, but it carried people toward the future, and that, in its own way, is just as meaningful. So, why did the Boeing 787 fall short of Qantas's ultimate mission? The answer lies not in failure, but in fit. The Dreamliner changed the way people experience long-haul flying, making journeys smoother, quieter, and more comfortable. But some dreams demand even more. For Qantas, that meant turning to Airbus for the next leap forward. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever flown on a 787? Was it a holiday that still warms your heart? A business trip that opened doors? Or maybe your very first trip overseas? Share your memories in the comments. They're what keep aviation history alive. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the skies.